Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're stepping into a quiet little room where grief wears a tie and the future arrives in envelopes. I'm Evelyn Grant, and this is the night a lawyer read my son's will. My daughter-in-law smiled like she'd rehearsed it. And I learned that family and fortune don't always share a last name. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan hum in the background. And let's begin tonight's journey together. The conference room was the polite kind water bottles lined like soldiers, a ficus that believed in photosynthesis, and a view of the parking lot pretending to be a cityscape. Ms. Cho, the probate attorney with the softest voice I've ever heard in a courtroom building, set a manila folder between us like a sacrament. "Thank you for coming," she said. And that tiny mercy almost unstacked me. Selena Voss. My son Daniel's widow arrived 10 minutes late and 5 degrees colder than the air conditioning. Her perfume had a thesis citrus. Ambition, no footnotes. She sat opposite me and crossed her legs in a way that made the chair seem like a prop. Odd fact of the evening, the word probate comes from the Latin probare, to prove. That's all this is supposed to be? A proving. How strange that proof can feel like judgment. My intellectual aging moment landed before the first page turned. Ms. Cho said, "We'll address the personal representative's duties." And my mind hiccuped. Executor representative cousins at the same party, different states. I wrote both on my pad, X to PR, because vocabulary deserves a chaperone. Dignity intact, pen steady. Miss Cho read with that gentle courtroom cadence they teach Daniel James Grant. Being of sound mind, the sentence everyone insists on even when grief already knows. He named Selena as personal representative. He appointed a corporate trustee for anything that asked for math. Then came the pieces you can feel before you hear, "To my wife, Selena Voss. I leave the residence at 1121 Maple Heights, together with its contents, and the sum of $17 million to be held in trust for her benefit. A comma, a breath, a life rearranging furniture. And to my mother, Evelyn Rose Grant," Ms. Cho continued. "I leave the Willow Creek cabin and its surrounding acreage to be hers outright." She paused. "There are no additional specific bequests." Selena didn't smile at me. She smiled at the table, which struck me as practical, if not kind. "Daniel always wanted me to feel secure," she said, as if the air needed coaching. I pictured the cabin, 43 acres of scruffy pines and a roof that whistles when the wind forgets its key. Victor and I bought it decades ago because we needed a place where the clock's voice couldn't reach us. I love it. But love doesn't insulate pipes. "Testamentary freedom," Miss Cho said softly, almost to herself, as if invoking a phrase might brace the room. Academic phrase of the night. And not wrong in this country. You can often leave your life to whomever you want, and the law will clap for your decision even if the living don't. Selena shifted toward Miss Cho. "We're ready to transfer the title immediately," she said. "And I'll need the house keys, of course." The house keys. The phrase did something impolite to my pulse. Daniel and I used to stand on those Maple Heights steps with grocery bags and bad jokes, letting summer loose into the hallway like a friendly dog. I could see the nick in the banister where his science fair volcano discovered gravity. Keys are metal? Yes. but also a biography you can carry. I folded my hands so the biography wouldn't spill. Ms. Cho, to her credit, honored the river between process and pity. There will be a short creditor period, she said. Then deeds, then transfers. I'll coordinate with the trustee for the financial accounts. Ms. Voss, I'll need a copy of your ID today. Selena slid a sleek card across the table. She was efficient, and efficiency is an easy costume for certainty. And the cabin, she added, turning to me with that airy tone women reserve for one another when there's an audience. It'll be cozy, quaint. You've always loved that place. Cozy is a thermostat setting, I said, pleasantly. Cabin is a weather system. 3 jokes for my ribcage, quietly, so the lungs would remember they had work. If legal pads came with tissues, funerals would run on time. If citrus perfume could notarize feelings, we'd all be in compliance. If chairs gave affidavits, this one would swear it's overheard worse. Ms. Cho slid an envelope toward me. Inside a set of old brass cabin keys, a small topographic map, and a photocopy of the property description that read like a love letter from a surveyor. We'll send a formal letter with next steps, she said. And Evelyn, if you need assistance with utilities or repairs, I can recommend practical help. The practical help had a line break where the word money wanted to sit. I nodded. Thank you. We signed the receipts that prove you sat where your heart broke like an adult. Selena scrolled her phone between pages, thumbs moving with the briskness of someone confirming a victory parade route. I practiced stillness until it belonged to me again. After, in the hallway, she caught my sleeve as if we shared a secret. I'll have movers at the house by Friday, she said brightly. It'll be easier for you at the cabin. Fewer reminders. Of Daniel, I asked, and my voice did not crack, which felt like passing some private exam. Reminders are how people we love continue to pay rent. She blinked annoyance. Pity. Something sharpened for use. I'm just trying to help. The trust will take care of me, and you'll have the cabin. Everyone gets what they need. Needs are not nouns you get to assign, I said gently. But I hear that you feel secure. That is good. Her smile cooled a degree. You'll be fine. Evelyn, she said, in the same tone you use with a stray dog who insists on owning a porch. The elevator doors opened, and the universe, bored with us, offered a way out. I stood beside her in that mirrored box while our faces did their separate arithmetic. On the ground floor, she turned left toward the parking lot Hallelujah's contracts. Painters, the locksmith's business card printed with a lion that had never installed a deadbolt. I turned right toward the bus stop and the kind of silence that chooses you back. Odd fact. Second helping legal envelopes have gum that tastes like childhood, if you're old enough to remember letter mail starch and a dare. I licked one to seal my copy of the will and thought, ridiculous and true. I'm still someone's mother. Back home, the house did what houses do after courtrooms. It exhaled and asked, what's next? I filled a kettle as if boiling water could notarize my intentions. I set a single suitcase on the bed, like a prop in a play about leaving without spectacle. In the back of the closet, on a shelf that hadn't yet learned loss, sat a battered banker's box with my late husband's handwriting, Edward Cabin Docks. Edward, my husband, Daniel's father, 2 men, 2 gravestones, one last name trying to hold the story steady. I rested my fingers on the cardboard like a pulse. Not tonight, I told the box. Tonight we survive fluorescent light. I wrote a list because lists are grief's favorite scaffolding. Call utilities. Check cabin well pump. Find flashlight. Pack wool. Bring toolkit. I added spare batteries twice because some redundancies earn their keep. Then I wrote, on a separate line that belonged to another story, ask Miss Cho mineral rights attached academic habit. Nosy hope. By dusk, I had reduced my life to the items a car seat can bless the suitcase. The kettle, a photo of Daniel at 8 with a cowlick arguing philosophy, and the little tin of tomato seeds we meant to plant last spring but didn't. I looked around the living room, our living room, until today's punctuation, and named things quietly so they'd know. I respected the work they've done: sofa, lamp, frame, stairs. Naming is a ritual that keeps a room from becoming a rumor. When I finally lay down, I didn't sleep. Grief is terrible at arithmetic. It thinks one night equals a decade. I stared at the ceiling fan and let its hum stitch a small border around the long, unruly country of my thoughts. Tomorrow, the cabin, a roof that whistles, a map tucked into an envelope that believes in proof, and a box marked Edward Cabin Docks waiting like a throat clearing in a quiet room. 3 last jokes for the pillow, so lungs clock in for the night shift. If probate had a lullaby, it would be sung by a stapler. If security deposits came with compassion, we'd all sign faster. If you'll be fine were a currency, women could fund the moon. I set the kettle for the morning, placed the cabin keys on the counter where the moon could see them, and whispered into the ordinary dark, "Okay then, let's see what the woods remember." The cabin greeted me the way old places do, with a draft that smelled like pine and resignation, and a door that only remembered how to close if you explained it twice. I parked under the tallest fir, killed the engine, and let the forest perform its sound check. Wind in the needles. A far-off creek, still confident about gravity. Something small negotiating custody with the underbrush. Willow Creek. 43 acres of scruffy trees and a porch that has opinions about knees. Inside. The air was that particular cold you only get from rooms that forgot mammals exist. I set my single suitcase on the couch. Put the kettle on the electric stove that believes in patience, and walked the perimeter like a watchman, windows latched. Wood stove sulking in the corner, well pump switch by the breaker panel. My first intellectual aging moment of the day arrived exactly on cue. I stood in front of the gray metal box and blanked on the words circuit breaker. Offered my brain fuse thing, then electric closet. Then finally 2 minutes and one muttered pep talk, later breaker panel. I wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to the door, because vocabulary deserves a hug. Dignity intact. Lights restored. Odd fact of the morning, many rural deeds still describe property with meets and bounds measurements from a witness tree or a stone pile that might have retired a century ago. Which is to say, even the law admits that some landmarks are really just rumors with bark. I unpacked like a person courting the room's approval. Sheets first, so the bed would forgive me later. A thin quilt and an extra wool blanket that looked like it remembers the Eisenhower administration. In the kitchen, I lined a shelf with 3 comforts that survive probate: a tin of tea, a jar of honey, a small shaker of salt. The kettle clicked at last, and the first curl of steam performed a ceremony no courtroom can fake. And on the table, naughty, generous, proud of its scars, I set the battered banker's box labeled Edward Cabin Docks. Last night I told it not tonight. This morning I said, all right then, and opened the flaps. The smell was half paper, half cedar, and a little bit of 1997. Top layer. The cabin deed in Victor's neat hand. He filled forms like he believed neatness could bend time. A photocopy of the surveyor's map. A receipt from a hardware store where the cashier's name tag probably read Earl, and a Polaroid of Daniel at 12, gap-toothed, holding a trout with a seriousness that belongs to Sundays. Beneath that, a manila envelope marked Minerals in Victor's engineer printing. I sat down, heat from the tea cupping my knuckles, and slid the envelope free inside. A property description I don't remember ever reading out loud, together with all appurtenances thereunto belonging, including but not limited to water rights and timber, less and except the coal, oil, gas, and other minerals heretofore reserved. Less and except 2 words that can turn a forest into a doily. But clipped to the page was a later filing 21 years ago, shortly after Daniel left for college, recorded in the county in the smallest, most polite typeface, quitclaim and release of mineral reservations from a defunct timber company to one Edward L. Grant. Victor never bragged. He archived. There's a difference. I felt something recalibrate behind my ribs, the click a compass makes when it remembers north without asking permission. I spread the maps, layered the older meets and bounds diagram under the newer one, and found a penciled note in Victor's tidy block letters. Check the north field. 2 seeps after heavy rain. I could hear him say it, the way he always did when he was excited, but credible, as if the earth had told him a secret and he felt morally obligated to document it in duplicate. Academic phrase of the day, chain of title. The public story of who owned what, when, and with which attached promises. Most people meet it when a closing takes too long and someone swears about a 1978 lien. I was meeting it with a kettle and a pencil and the feeling that my life had a footnote no one at Ms. Cho's table thought to read. I took the maps to the porch because thinking outdoors makes my sentences less dramatic. The steps complained in their native tongue. I traced the property line with a finger, then the narrow squiggle of Willow Creek, then the rectangle Victor had labeled North Field, a meadow that spends half the year insisting it could be a lake if it wanted. 2 seeps after heavy rain. If you've ever watched crude bubble up through meadow grass slow, embarrassed, like a secret with molasses, you know it's not the romantic gusher from movies. It's geology tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Excuse me, I exist." 3 jokes, whispered to my rib cage so my lungs would keep their appointments. If oil leases had pickup lines, they'd start with less and accept and absolutely ruin the mood. If breaker panels came with Cliff's Notes, they'd be titled "Don't Lick Anything." If rural maps told the truth, half the landmarks would read "Used to be that tree." I left the papers and walked the north path with a thermos and my old boots that remember every creek crossing I was too proud to admit I feared. The meadow accepted me like a polite host, no promises, no hostility, just room. Last week's rain still lived in the low spots. In 2 places along the eastern edge, a thin, iridescent sheen hovered on puddled water where there should have been just sky. It smelled faintly of the inside of a mechanic's hands. Not dramatic. Not nothing. Back at the cabin, I dug deeper in the box and found a Ziploc bag with 3 receipts from Heritage First Bank Safe Deposit Box Rental. Box 247, last paid 8 years ago. Taped to the bag a strip of duct tape labeled Shed Toolbox in Victor's script, with an arrow as decisive as a man who never learned to say, perhaps. He was telling me, across time, Go outside. Evelyn, open a box that isn't made of paper. The shed, bless it, leaned the way a drunk does when deciding whether to behave. Inside a red metal toolbox, the kind whose latches believe they have authority. And under it, a coffee can of roofing nails that had not enjoyed the decades. The toolbox key was in the bag. I held the metal oval a long second, then put it back. The afternoon was already crowded. The next step could be a ceremony of its own. The wind picked up, and the porch remembered a hymn. I made a second cup of tea and phoned Miss Cho with the part of my voice that does Monday mornings. "Quick question," I said. "In the recorded title for Willow Creek, are mineral rights severed or attached? I'm seeing a quitclaim to Edward Grant." She paused the way good lawyers do when they shift from empathy to math. "Email me the instrument numbers," she said. "I'll pull the images from the county and confirm chain of title surprises are more common than you'd think." "Meets and bounds still referencing a witness tree," I said, half laughing. "I've met that tree," she replied. "It retired in 1963. I sent photos of the filings and the penciled note about the seeps. While the forest did what forests do, translate wind to gossip, I made a second list. Call Heritage first. Ask about box 247. Check shed toolbox. Photo Northfield seeps after rain. I added don't drown in hope because I know myself. That's when the truck came up the drive too slowly to be lost and too quickly to be kindness. It was new, shiny enough to reflect my face, and had a logo on the door in a font that tried to be reasonable Crescent Ridge Development. I stood on the porch with a mug that suddenly felt ceremonial. A man with approved hair and boots that had never met mud stepped out. Paused just long enough to decide whether I'd be impressed, then smiled like a brochure. "Mrs. Grant, I'm Travis from Crescent Ridge. We've heard you're the new owner. We're buying up parcels out here for conservation, restoring habitat. You know, would love to make you an offer for this. Charming spot." "Conservation," I repeated, as if the syllables were shy. "How kind." "We can do cash," he said, already reaching into the truck for a folder. "Close fast. 75,000 above county valuation." He said the number the way salesmen say holidays. I sipped. Why the hurry? He smiled wider. "We like to wrap things up before folks get overwhelmed by repairs. Cabins are money pits. We're doing you a favor." I looked at his boots, too clean for the conversation, then at the folder labeled Purchase Agreement in the kind of font that despises eyebrows. "Do you know much about meets and bounds, Travis?" I asked. "Witness trees. Reservations released iridescent sheens after rain." He blinked. "Mom, do you have a card?" I asked pleasantly. He handed me a rectangle with a phone number, a logo, and a promise to be reasonable. I flipped it over and wrote less and accept. Released on the back. He couldn't have recognized the handwriting, but the forest did. "Let me know before the week's out," he said, a hint of impatience showing its hem. "Offers like this don't hang around." "I find mine do," I said. "But thank you for the conservation." I smiled the way women do when we have scissors in our pocket, but decide to put them away. He left with a wave that belonged on a billboard. The road swallowed the truck. The forest went back to its unions. I stood with my mug and let my shoulders drop. 3 last jokes for the evening so breath would report for duty. If conservation wore cologne, in some mouths it would smell like diesel and paperwork. If a brochure ever met my porch, the splinters would file a counteroffer. If boots could testify, mine would raise a muddy hand and swear to tell the truth. I brought the banker's box back inside and stacked the maps, the filings, the envelope marked minerals, and the note about Heritage First Box 247 where the kettle could see them. Tomorrow the shed and the toolbox could have their scene. Tonight. I wrote one line on an index card and slid it into the envelope with the cabin deed. We are not done being proved. The shed door stuck, the way old resentments do, half hinge, half habit. I braced a shoulder, negotiated, and it surrendered with a sigh of cedar and mouse biography. Morning light came in at a slant that forgave most sins. On the workbench waited the red metal toolbox from the note in Edward's hand. My late husband. Careful archivist of everything except his own goodness. The latches clicked like a librarian approving your posture. Top tray a compass I haven't argued with since the Carter administration, grease pencils, a roll of flagging tape the color of impatient traffic, and a little magnifier I kept calling the jeweler thingy until my brain, after a small coffee, delivered loop. Intellectual aging event completed, dignity intact. Beneath that, a battered field notebook labeled Willow Creek Northfield in Edwards' square letters. 3 glass vials wrapped in paper towels. And an envelope I didn't recognize. Addressed in Daniel's handwriting, Mom. If you're the one opening this. I sat on the work stool as if the letter could measure my sincerity. His words were ordinary and therefore surgical. If Dad's notes send you to the shed, start with the notebook and the little jars. I'm not sure what we have, but I'm sure Selena doesn't love the cabin for the reasons I do. Keep this between you and the trees until you're certain. If I'm wrong, you can scold me later. I love you. D. I breathed slow so I wouldn't miss any oxygen. The vials were labeled in Edward's hand. Seep A, Seep B, Control Creek. He'd taped a post-it over them. Do the puddle test, poke rainbow. Petroleum recoils. Iron bacteria shatters. Odd fact of the day, a rainbow sheen on water isn't always oil. Iron oxidizing bacteria make a brittle. Fractal film that breaks like old paint when disturbed. While petroleum swirls and recoheres like it has opinions about itself. I carried the kit to the Northfield because sentences behave outdoors. The meadow received me with its usual diplomacy, hummocks negotiating with ankles. Grass considering every breeze. At the first low spot, I crouched and touched the surface with a twig. The sheen pulled away and lazily knitted back together. The way a rumor reassembles even after you apologize. Seep a petroleum behavior. At the second, the film shattered into angular shards that skittered, then vanished. Seep B bacteria. Benign as gossip that dies in daylight. I took photos. Labeled the coordinates in the margin of Edward's notebook. And let my lungs count to 60 without trying to narrate the future. Back in the cabin, I opened the field notebook. Edward's tidy observations marched down the page dates. Rainfall totals. Sketches that made the meadow look like geometry with a sense of humor. In the back pocket, he'd tucked photocopies of a 20-year-old quitclaim and release of mineral reservations, the one I'd found in the banker's box, plus a note. File numbers here. Chain clean into our name. Confirm county index. Underlined twice Heritage First Box 247. My phone pinged with an email from Ms. Cho, pulled the images. The 2003 quitclaim released the prior severance. Your deed vests surface and mineral together. In plain speech, you own what's under you. Advise do not sign anything with developers. If approached, refer to counsel. Also, take pictures of seeps after rain. Note barometric pressure if you can. I'll contact a neutral landman to confirm. A second. Shorter line P.S. Chain of title party says your witness tree retired before the Beatles. We will translate. 3 jokes scribbled for the ribcage so breath didn't panic at the word under. If witness trees got pensions, mine would be buying a condo in Florida. If loops had Yelp pages, I'd review mine great for truths and splinters. If rumors were hydrocarbons, some neighborhoods would be proven reserves. I made tea because caffeine is my non-disclosure agreement. Then I dialed Heritage First Bank. A clerk with a voice that believed in Tuesday answered. Safe deposit, I asked. Box 247. Last paid 8 years ago. She tapped keys with the authority of someone who has learned to ignore confetti. We have it, she said. Annual fee and both keys needed. Photo ID. We'll need to drill if a key is missing. I had 1 key in the Ziploc. Edward's second was either with him underground or somewhere that wasn't this room. I'll bring what I have, I said. Tomorrow morning. 9:30, she replied. The vault likes punctuality. Academic phrase of the day, split estate when one person owns the surface and someone else owns the minerals. It's why ranchers sometimes wake up to rigs where cows once practiced meditation. Miss Cho's email suggested our split had once existed and had been stitched back together by Edward's quitclaim. Translation: less circus, more leverage. I opened Daniel's letter again and let it sit in my hands like a warmed stone. He'd seen something, not necessarily geology, but choreography. Keep this between you and the trees until you're certain. Under the sentence. Edward had penciled a father's amendment and then call a lawyer. Not a neighbor. The 2 voices harmonized in absentia. The truck from Crescent Ridge did not reappear that afternoon, but the air held the fizz of a day that was going to need a folder. I labeled a new one Minerals, Chain and Field and fed it the quitclaim copies, the SEEP photos, Daniel's letter scanned, the original would not travel, and a sheet titled Do Not Do Sign, Promise, Sell, Post. I printed Ms. Cho's email and slid it in front like a bouncer. Before dusk, I gave myself small homework practice saying sentences that keep rooms from exploding. I'm not ready to make any decisions. Please put that in writing. Counsel will respond. They tasted like fence posts, plain, vertical, and surprisingly comforting. The cabin did its evening noises, wood resettling its opinions, the fridge giving a small cough to prove it was alive, the well pump clicking like an old friend. I took the loop to the window and examined a splinter that had tried to join my thumb. The little lens magnified the world until it was nothing but ridges and shine. It's humbling how large a small problem looks under the right glass and how solvable once you see its edges. I set out what tomorrow wanted: the safe deposit key in a tiny envelope, driver's license, a check for the fee, Edward's field notebook, and a courage that prefers fluorescent light to folklore. I added the toolbox's lower tray to the staging area too. I hadn't explored it yet. When I lifted it, a second tier revealed itself, topographic overlays printed on my favorite kind of paper, the kind that votes no on gloss, and a business card paper clipped to a letter on North Star Energy letterhead. Mrs. Grant, per our conversation with your husband, Edward, we remain interested in leasing mineral rights under your Willow Creek acreage, subject to title confirmation and standard diligence. Please contact if you wish to proceed. The date was 7 years old. A handwritten note at the bottom in Edward's hand. Too soon. Confirm ownership first. No signatures without Evelyn. I felt a laugh I couldn't afford. Even in the afterlife, you're bossy. I told him, and the wind came through the chinking like it agreed. I didn't call North Star. Not yet. Diligence first, chain clean, counsel looped. The part of me that wanted to sprint called the part of me that pays the light bill and apologized for the impulse. 3 more jokes to keep oxygen from getting grand. If patience were a commodity, I'd be rich enough to ignore commodities. If vaults had love languages, it would be bring both keys. If emails had weather, Ms. Cho's would be clear and 72 degrees with a sensible breeze. I wrote to Miss Cho, found old North Star letter, non-binding interest pending title. Not contacting yet. Vault appointment, 9:30 tomorrow, box 247. 1 key only. She replied, perfect. If they say the word lease, say counsel. If they say bonus, say receipt. Law is lullaby. I placed her email atop the folder and clipped it with the good binder clip, the one that can lift a house if you let it. Night came in like a polite usher. I stacked tomorrow's papers by the door, put the loop back in the tray because order is my anti-anxiety, and made soup with more pepper than poetry. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch and let the dark inform me of its agenda. An owl tried out a few vowels. The creek argued with a rock and won. Somewhere in the meadow, Seep A considered its options. Seep B minded its bacteria business. My job, for now, was to collect nouns and leave the adjectives alone. I set the tomato timer for 12 minutes, not for cooking, but for courage, and lay down under the quilt that remembers people who fought with radios. Not phones. Tomorrow vault. Keys. A drilled lock if necessary. And a box that had been patient for 8 years. We were still being proved. I was starting to enjoy the standard of evidence. Heritage First Bank wears its seriousness on purpose. The lobby smells faintly of paper that means it, and carpet that's read a policy manual. At 9:28 a.m., a clerk with a Tuesday voice checked my ID, glanced at the tiny envelope holding my one safe deposit key, and paged the vault manager. 2 staff must be present, she said. Kind without making a big deal of it. And because you only have 1 key, we'll need to drill and recore the lock. She said drill, the way surgeons say incision, not dramatic. Just the verb that lets the day continue. Odd fact of the morning, safe deposit boxes use a dual control lock bank key plus customer key. Lose yours. And they bring out a very calm technician with a toolkit that looks like it could fix a violin or end a siege. Either outcome, they write it down. We signed a short ceremony of forms authorization to drill, acknowledgement of fees, a promise I wouldn't sue the drill for doing its job. The manager, Ms. Alvarez, led us past a door that made more sense than most doors. Inside, the vault sounded like a library that stores metal air dense with quiet. Time pronounced like a vowel. The technician wore magnifying goggles and a concentration you could have balanced a tray on. He turned, tapped, and in a minute, the lock gave up without tantrum. Box 247, he said, sliding the drawer to a long table. We'll step back while you review. Academic phrase of the day, later in time instrument controls, when 2 documents argue. The newer, properly executed, one usually wins. It's the courtroom's way of saying, update trumps déjà vu. I lifted the lid and met paper that had been waiting like a polite guest. On top, Edward's inventory, of course, there was an inventory typed, dated, initialed, clipped with a smileless paperclip. Under that, a sealed envelope with Daniel's handwriting across the flap. Will plus codicil originals. If this is being opened by anyone except Mom or Miss Cho, please call my lawyer. My lungs forgot about oxygen for a second. I set the envelope down and let my hands catch up with my face. Beneath a thumb drive labeled Ledgers in Edwards block letters. A flat, old-fashioned microcassette tape with a stick-on label, Kitchen 412. 2 blue folders. Mineral lease correspondence and title cleanup, and tucked at the bottom like a foundation stone. A narrow tube of rolled maps with surveyor stamps and the sort of signatures people make when they're being watched by clipboards. Ms. Alvarez stood at a respectful distance, the clerk beside her, both looking at the wall with the devotion of saints. May I have a private viewing room? I asked. She nodded, gestured, and the box and I relocated to a small cubicle where furniture goes to be serious. She set a timer 30 minutes, not to rush me, just to keep the day honest. I opened Daniel's envelope with the care you use on old photographs. Inside an original will dated 8 months after the version Miss Cho read yesterday, and a short codicil, a witnessed amendment dated 4 months later. I read slowly, the way you read directions when night driving is involved. This later will still loved Selena generously, but with nouns and verbs that understood boundaries, the residence to Selena, the bulk of liquid accounts to a marital trust, the Willow Creek cabin, and all associated mineral and water rights to my mother, Evelyn, and in the codicil, language that landed like a chair pulled out for a tired person. Should any beneficiary contest or interfere with my mother's quiet enjoyment or possession, that party's share converts to a charitable gift in my name. A no contest clause with manners is... I stared at the signatures until they felt less like a mirage. Witness lines, 2 names I recognized from Daniel's firm. Notarization with a seal you could feel with your thumb. Later in time, executed properly. Filed nowhere yet. Elder wisdom of the day: make your boring appointments when the stakes are high. Spectacle consumes oxygen, but procedure returns it. 3 jokes scribbled for the ribcage so breath remembered. If codicils were kitchen tools, they'd be the tiny whisk you forget about until the sauce curdles. If vault timers had personalities, mine would be supportive aunt with punctuality. If paperclips ran for office, their platform would be hold it together. I called Miss Cho from the little room. Found a later original and a codicil, I said, letting the words put their feet on the floor. Dated 8 and 4 months after the will we saw. Proper witnesses. Notarized. She exhaled a sound lawyers make when the universe briefly decides to be legible. Do not remove the originals from the bank yet, she said. Ask them to make certified copies while we prepare a petition to admit the later will and codicil. I'll meet you at my office at 2. We'll also file a copy with the clerk today. What about the box inventory? I asked. Photograph the contents where they lie. Then request an itemized receipt for anything you carry out, she said. Evidentiary chain loves receipts. I photographed the will and codicil. The mineral lease correspondence folder with a letter from North Star Energy that was not the one in the shed. This one had a number that made the room blink an option to lease with a 50,000 bonus upon title confirmation, and a royalty that would make even a pessimist respect verbs. Dated 5 years ago. A sticky note in Edward's hand. We decline for now. Title not fully confirmed. No signatures without Evelyn. There was more. The title cleanup folder contained recorded copies of the quitclaim and release of mineral reservations, plus a county clerk printout marking the chain as clear through Edward, then to me by deed after Victor's death, and a checklist titled, To File If I Die Before Tying Bows, Daniel's handwriting. 1. Will this one? 2 codicil. 3. Mineral chain memo. 4. Contact Ms. Cho. 5. If Selena is difficult, activate no contest clause kindly. He had drawn a tiny frowning face and then crossed it out, replacing it with a square, his symbol for behave. The microcassette labeled Kitchen 412 kept tugging at my sleeve. I held it up, and my brain, very pleased with itself, produced an old digital voice recorder from the bottom of the box, battery removed for Mercy. Ms. Alvarez, patron saint of calm, returned with a fresh AAA. This model still works, she said, the way people say. Miracles are mostly maintenance. I pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the little room warm, tired, resolute. Mom, if you're hearing this, I didn't get my paperwork filed before the universe reminded me who's in charge. The cabin and minerals are yours in the later will. If Selena fights you, the codicil stands. Ms. Cho has notes. The North Star offer is real, but only if title is clean. Don't sign until Cho blesses it. I love you. This is boring because it's meant to hold. A pause. Then softer. You taught me paper beats adjectives. Consider this a stack. I let the silence after his voice do what silences do, be bigger than a room and still fit in your chest. Then I did the small, correct things. I asked Ms. Alvarez for certified copies. She arranged a notary, a copy machine that minded its tone, and embossed seals that bit paper with satisfying authority. We made duplicates of the will, codicil, the North Star letter, and the title memo. I left the originals in the box per Miss. Cho's instruction. Ms. Alvarez logged each page, initialed the log, and slid everything into a bank envelope with the ceremonial grace of a choir robbing up. At the counter, I paid the drilling fee and the overdue rent for the box. The receipt felt like a small, dignified flag. As I tucked it into my folder, Miss Alvarez lowered her voice. If anyone asks about this box without your presence and ID, the vault will say no with feeling, she said. We protect decency here. Some banks sell products. This one, today, sold oxygen. On the sidewalk, the day had the decency to be plain. I texted Ms. Cho certifieds in hand. Originals remain ETA 145. She replied with the legal equivalent of a blanket good. Clerk at 2:30 will file. Then notify counsel for Miss Voss, kindly, promptly, on paper. I smiled because somewhere a stapler would sing. I stopped at a copy shop to scan the certified copies into a folder labeled Probate Later Will and another labeled Minerals North Star. I emailed both to Miss Cho and blind copied a new address I had created for this saga, because I have learned to keep dust and dishes on different shelves. 3 jokes for the walk to Miss Cho's office so my lungs would not mistake the courthouse for a theater. If notaries had a cologne, it would be embossed seal with notes of toner. If safe deposit drills wrote memoirs. Chapter 1 would be It's Not Personal. If later in time instruments had a theme song, it would be a polite remix of Move Over, I'm Current. At 1:58, I sat across from Ms. Cho. She read, nodded, underlined exactly twice, and said, "We will correct the record, no fireworks." We walked 2 blocks to the clerk. The petition to admit the later will and codicil felt both heavier and lighter than its pages. The clerk stamped. The stamp thumped. The thump landed in my chest like a bird choosing the right branch. Elder wisdom. Second serving, don't confuse the absence of shouting with the absence of power. Some victories wear blue ink and quiet shoes. Back at the cabin near dusk, the Woods accepted the update with their usual neutrality. I set the certified copies in my binder, wrote filed 2:37 p.m. on an index card, and slid it under a clip. The kettle clicked yes. I stood on the porch, listened to the creek argue kindly with a rock, and told the air, we have our nouns. Tomorrow could come with its adjectives if it wanted. Tonight, paper would hold. The clerk's stamp has a way of staying in your chest even after you've left the building. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Ms. Cho with 3 sentences that sounded like furniture you can trust. Later will and codicil received for filing. Notice going to Ms. Voss's counsel today, kindly, promptly, on paper. I'm also recording a notice of interest on the mineral estate so speculators don't get ideas. I read it twice, then once more for my nervous system. Academic phrase of the day, lis pendens Latin for suit pending. It's a public flag you plant at the courthouse to say, don't do anything cute with this title while we sort the nouns. Ms. Cho would file one if needed. For now, the notice of interest was enough to tell the room to use its indoor voice. By 10, the phone decided to audition for theater. Selena called, her tone set to concern, tipped with instruction. I wish you'd told me before filing things. It makes everything adversarial. She breathed the way people breathe when they're arranging a stage. Anyway, I have good news. A conservation group is offering cash for the cabin 75 above county valuation. Travis can bring paperwork today. You can be out of there by the weekend and finally relax. Conservation, Travis, I asked. The mug warmed my hands. The adjective warmed my suspicion. He's with Crescent Ridge, she said. They're buying parcels to restore habitat. Let me help you, Evelyn. Odd fact of the day, people mispronounce quitclaim as quitclaim when they're in a hurry to separate you from something you own. Different vowel, different outcome. I appreciate your care, I said gently. Please have Travis email the agreement. PDF with all exhibits. My brain, bless it, briefly served up appendix and annex, then delivered exhibits right on time. Intellectual aging event completed, dignity intact. Counsel will review. A sigh, do we have to make this about lawyers? No, I said, we have to make this about paper. Emails arrived like weather. From Travis purchase agreement draft, from Ms. Cho. 1 minute later, because she had me auto-forwarding, got it, do not sign. Clause 12 attempts to sever and assign all subsurface rights not expressly retained by seller. We will reply with a red line and a question which subsurface rights are these. Exactly, since the chain vests them in you. A third email followed. Also, Exhibit C is blank. That's where deeds go to hide. Do not let them. I made tea and opened the draft. The conservation language did its coy little dance in the recitals. But the body of the agreement wore work boots quick close. Warranty deeds. Routine title curatives at seller's expense. And Clause 12, the one that tried to walk off with anything underground not bolted to the sky. In the footer, an address that mapped to a mailbox store. Crescent Ridge. Apparently, liked conservation and convenience. I called the sheriff's non-emergency line to log a simple Unremarkable request. This is Evelyn Grant at Willow Creek, I said. A company has visited twice about buying. I prefer schedule and daylight. If they show up uninvited again, I'll need a deputy's card to hand them. The dispatcher, a woman who sounded like she has raised both teenagers and tomato plants, said, "We'll put you on drive-by. Signs help. No trespass by appointment only keeps most boots polite." So I printed two. No trespass. Appointments only. Counsel present. Blue tape held them like a thoughtful friend. At noon, Travis texted anyway. "Be there in 20 paperwork in hand," I replied, with the sentence that has become my porch light. "Please email your availability for a scheduled meeting. Counsel present." A minute later, Selena's coming too. She wants to make sure you're okay. I added Miss Cho to the thread and wrote, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. on the porch. Your counsel welcome. No signatures. No entry. Miss." Cho followed with a line only lawyers can make sound like a lullaby, Crescent Ridge. "Please bring your corporate registration and proof of authority to sign. Thank you." 3 jokes for the rib cage so oxygen wouldn't pack its bags. If conservation had a LinkedIn, some people would endorse it for euphemism. If blank exhibits could talk, they'd say, "Trust me." And that's how you know not to. If Blue Painter's tape had a love language, it would be acts of service. The afternoon asked for chores. I photographed the north field again. This time with a cheap inclinometer app open so I could note the slope. If an engineer asked me later, I wanted data, not adjectives. I logged weather, barometric pressure, and my shoe size because thoroughness is a hobby. When the sky grayed, I stood in the shed doorway with the toolbox and practiced saying, "Please put that in writing," to the rake. The rake was very agreeable. At 4, Ms. Cho called. Selena's counsel received notice. She said, He replied with the sentence that pays for his suits. "My client intends to cooperate fully. We'll take him at his nouns." "Thank you," I said. And I pinged a neutral landman, someone who reads chain of title for sport and has no dog in this fight. If we need him, he'll walk the courthouse with us. Selena texted an hour later, "I'll be there at 10. I'm bringing coffee." I looked at the screen and saw a younger version of her, the one who brought me soup when Daniel was in the hospital, the one who called me Eve just once and meant it. I answered, "Thanks. I'll brew here. Plenty to share." It cost nothing to be gentle with a better memory of a person. Night settled like a sensible blanket. I set out tomorrow's props, printed draft with Ms. Cho's nascent red lines. A legal pad labeled "Meeting Crescent Ridge." 2 pens that don't get stage fright. And the smallest audio recorder I own. Not because I plan to spring it on anyone, but because note-taking has a partner and it's called backup. One-party consent is the law in some places, in others it isn't. I wrote, "Ask Cho re-recording" on the pad and decided the pens would do the heavy lifting. Before bed, I reread Daniel's kitchen tape transcript and felt my spine choose its height. "You taught me paper beats adjectives. Tomorrow would be nouns and verbs on a porch with splinters that have more integrity than some contracts." Morning came with fog and an owl filing a complaint about something only owls understand. At 9:55, tires whispered on gravel. Travis emerged first, vest, folder, chin. Selena followed in neutrals, face careful. I stepped onto the porch with mugs and the expression I wear for birthdays and bad news open. Ordinary, unamused. "Thanks for seeing us," Travis said, laying the folder on the table as if wood could be impressed. We kept it simple. I find simple is a personality, not a format. I said, let's start with exhibits. He blinked. Excuse me? Exhibits. I repeated, C. Especially the deeds you intend to record. I turned a page. Let silence do a small amount of paperwork. Clause 12 loomed. Impolite. We can fill those in at closing, he said. No, I said. You can fill those in for someone else. I looked at Selena, not unkind. We are all tired. Tired people deserve specific nouns. Selena's jaw softened, then reset. Evelyn, this is a way out for you. The cabin is a lot. The heater. The well, let me take care of you. Take care, I said, is a verb I reserve for soup. Then gentler. You will be secure however this goes. The marital trust is generous. I will be secure on this land. I slid Miss Cho's card across the table. Counsel will respond to any actual offers. Travis tried pivot number 2. We can do an escrow holdback for repairs. He pronounced escrow like a charm meant to stop wolves. He put a second sheet on the table, an amendment typed in a hurry. My brain offered writer first, then corrected to addendum close enough. And the problem wasn't the label. It was the content. The addendum said the quiet part out loud. Seller conveys all hydrocarbons beneath the property whether or not described in the deed. I pushed my mug back and let the steam choose sides. Clause 12, in this addendum attempt to transfer things that aren't yours to buy, I said, are chain vests minerals with the surface. A notice of interest is on file. If you record any instrument clouding my title, my counsel will escort it to a judge for a haircut. Selena went very still. For a moment, I saw the version of her who likes chairs that don't wobble. Daniel told me before he wanted me safe. She said. He said the cabin was yours. The last word was quiet as a confession. It is, I said, and safety isn't a zero-sum sport. Travis closed the folder like a man who has met an unexpected cliff. We'll revisit, he said, and took 2 steps toward retreat. Keep the coffee. He smiled without teeth and left the conservation behind in his tire tracks. Selena didn't leave. She wrapped her hands around the mug as if it could pronounce her name properly. You filed a later will, she said. Daniel filed a later love, I said, with nouns that fit our lives better. I don't want to fight, she whispered. Then don't start one, I said. And because mercy is a muscle, I added, we can meet with Miss Cho and your counsel. No surprises, no stage directions. She nodded, eyes doing that wet glass thing. I'll ask my lawyer for a time. Good, I said. Text me the appointment. I'll bring pens. They left. The porch breathed. The signs fluttered once and settled. I wrote the date and time on my legal pad and underlined Clause 12, the way a person underlines a snake. I emailed Ms. Cho a short debrief, facts first. Toys put away and attached the addendum Travis had tried to debut. She responded with 6 words that felt like a hand on my shoulder. Perfect. We will answer only in writing. 3 last jokes, so my lungs would clock out properly. If addenda were appetizers, I'd send Clause 12 back to the kitchen. If escrow were a spell, it would only work on wolves with law degrees. If porch splinters ran title, nobody would record nonsense. I washed the mugs, set the kettle for later, and walked the Northfield once because joy deserves equal time. The sheen at Seep A did its lazy choreography. Seep B shattered like old paint and minded its business. Back inside, I clipped today's papers into the binder and wrote one line on an index card that I slid in the front pocket. Boundaries are nouns with hinges. The day began with the sound a kettle makes when it remembers its job. I set out the small binder, the certified copies from the vault, and a clean legal pad with a single line at the top, nouns first. No performances. Ms. Cho had emailed at dawn 2 appointments stacked like bookends, a 10:30 joint meeting with Selena and her lawyer. Then a private review of ledgers, the thumb drive from the box with a forensic accountant on standby. I put on the navy dress that minds its own business and slipped Daniel's kitchen tape transcript into a sleeve by itself. Paper sits up straighter when it knows it matters. Odd fact of the morning. The yellow margin on a legal pad is sometimes called the down line, a lane for notes you don't want to lose in the traffic. I wrote, "Breathe" there, then underlined it twice like a volunteer lifeguard. At Ms. Cho's conference table, we set our props will, codicil, notice of interest, in a single page titled Stipulation. My brain briefly fetched stipple art dots and stipend money, then arrived where it meant to go, stipulation and agreement the court can adopt so everyone stops burning daylight. Intellectual aging event completed, dignity intact. Selena came in with her attorney, Mr. Alden, who had the polished look of a man coached by mahogany. He opened with exhale and outreach. "We all want clarity," he said, "and to avoid adversarial posture. Ms." Cho nodded as if the word clarity had finally paid its rent. "Then we'll stipulate to admit the later will and codicil," she said, tapping the blue ink signatures, "and we'll enter a litigation hold on all communications about the cabin, minerals, and Crescent Ridge your clients, your developers, and any agents. Academic phrase of the day, a litigation hold tells everyone to stop tidying their inboxes. Courts frown on memory loss that looks like a delete key." Alden read the codicil. The one that converted interference into charity went pale around the clever parts and asked for 5 minutes in the hallway. He came back with a tone that had swallowed some adjectives. "We'll stipulate," he said. He also produced a gently embarrassed smile. My client was under the impression the minerals were severed. Miss Cho slid over the filed quitclaim. "They were," she said. "And then they weren't." He nodded, understood. Selena kept her eyes on the table, hands folded like someone auditioning for peace. "Second item," Ms. Cho continued, swiveling a copy of the Crescent Ridge draft. "Clause 12 attempts to sever and assign subterranean rights. Exhibit C is blank. No more porch visits. All offers in writing to counsel, with full exhibits, not riders, stapled in the yard." Alden gave a lawyer's version of a wince. "Agreed." He promised to tell Travis to keep his boots on pavement. We signed the stipulation, blue ink doing its useful work. The room's shoulders dropped 1/2 inch. Elder wisdom of the day, the absence of theatrics is not the absence of progress. It is sometimes the only way progress survives. After they left, Ms. Cho locked the door and put on the expression she wears for radiology reports. "Ledgers?" she asked. I handed over Edward's thumb drive. She plugged it into a laptop that has seen more divorces than fireworks and opened a folder structure that would make a librarian proud. Operating, personal, cabin, minerals, taxes. She clicked personal, registers. Names appeared that made the room tilt internal transfers. Routine bills. And 3 entries highlighted in Edward's careful yellow Crescent Ridge Holdings, LLC. Retainer wire, $150,000. Maple Heights, HELOC. Transfer to SVOS 240,000. Oak and Slate, Chem Supply, Special Order Cashier's Check, $4,800. Don't jump, miss, Cho said before my breath could sprint. Chemistry doesn't always mean crime, and initials don't always mean person. We'll hand this to a forensic accountant and, separately, to Detective Cole Bennett to place a preservation request, no accusation. Just, please, don't lose anything. I nodded and felt my palm find the ceramic of the mug like a dock. Ms. Cho dialed on speaker, her voice the legal equivalent of chamomile. Detective Bennett. This is Cho. Estate matter with potential fraud vectors. We're forwarding a thumb drive chain intact and requesting a routine evidence preservation letter to 2 entities, including a developer and a vendor. The detective's voice had the competent tiredness of people who meet midnight sober. Send me what you have, he said. I'll open a file. No interviews yet. 2 more steps, Ms. Cho said, turning back to me. 1, we file the stipulation this afternoon so the court's calendar relaxes. 2, if Ms. Voss texts or shows up with coffee or contracts, you reply in 4 words, please route through counsel. Understood, I said. And if she brings actual coffee? Ms. Cho smiled the way surgeons smile at gallows humor that keeps hands steady. Bring your own. Not because we suspect harm, because boundaries taste better. 3 jokes for my ribs so oxygen would take its lunch break. If stipulations were kitchen tools, they'd be the colander strain out drama. Keep the pasta. If litigation holds had a ringtone, it would be the sound of a hard drive refusing flattery. If blue pens ran a city, there'd be fewer parades and better sidewalks. We broke for 10 minutes. In the hallway, Selena waited with a cardboard tray of coffees and a face trying to be the earlier version of itself. Peace offering, she said. The lids wore the kind of optimism that scalds. I brought your favorite mocha, 2 sugars. I brought mine, I said, lifting my thermos. Kettle at the cabin is bossy. I took the tray anyway and set it on the side table far from my mouth because kindness doesn't require consumption. Thank you. Her voice dropped to its human register. I don't understand any of this. She whispered. Daniel talked about a trust and then got sick and then... She stopped. The sentence shivered. We're putting it in order, I said. On paper. You'll be secure. I'll be here. No one needs to perform. She nodded, eyes shiny. Travis said it would be quick. I like quick when it looks like mercy. She looked small then. A person who has confused speed with care. We are all educated by the wrong tutors sometimes. Back inside, Ms. Cho had Mr. Weller, her neutral landman. On video, a man with courthouse eyes and boots off-screen. He'd pulled the county index and confirmed the chain severance long ago, quitclaim back to Edward, then deed into my name. No leases recorded, 2 memoranda of interest from speculators in the last year, both unsigned by us. You're clean, he said. Which is why the boys with logos are moving fast. He suggested photographing seeps after 3 more rains and keeping a log. Juries like calendars better than adjectives, he added, which made me want to bake him a pie. We filed the stipulation at 2:11 p.m. The clerk stamped. The stamp thumped. The thump put my pulse back where it belongs. Miss Cho emailed copies to Alden and, for sport, CC'd Travis with a single line, all cabin mineral communications to counsel only. Travis replied with an emoji that tried to be a handshake and landed somewhere near jazz hands. On the way back to the car, Detective Bennett called. Got your packet, he said. We're sending preservation letters to Crescent Ridge and to the chemical vendor. No conclusions. Just don't delete your Tuesday. He paused. Do you want a deputy at your 10 a.m. porch meetings? Sometimes uniforms are excellent discouragement. I think the porch knows how to hold, I said. But a card would be useful. He laughed softly. I'll put you on the drive-by route. Sign on your gate helps appointments only. Already laminated, I said. By late afternoon, the cabin remembered my shoes. I wrote preservation letters sent on an index card and clipped it under minerals, chain, and field. Then I opened the Kitchen 412 transcript again and let Daniel's ordinary voice be the weather. My hand found the lube and a splinter and a small gratitude for magnification that doesn't dramatize. Near dusk, a text from Selena. Thank you for not making a scene. Then coffee tomorrow, I'll bring yours black. I looked at my thermos, at the kettle that keeps its promises, and wrote back the 4-word treaty, Ms. Cho has trained into my bones. Please route through council. After a minute, another text, okay. Then, a minute after that, I'll try. Academic phrase. Second, helping procedural justice. The idea that people accept outcomes better when the process feels fair, even if the result stings. We were giving the process a chair and a pen. 3 last jokes for the pillow so the lungs would clock out properly. If Landman had a Boy Scout badge, it would read County Index Whisperer. If preservation letters were vitamins, I'd put them next to the kettle daily, with tea. If quick looked like mercy, my porch would ask to see its references. I turned off the lamp, left the fan on low, and let the cabin make its night noises. Somewhere, a clerk's stamp was cooling. Somewhere, a drive-by deputy was learning the curve of a gravel road. Somewhere, a developer's inbox was being told to keep its hands where everyone could see them. I set the tomato timer for 12 minutes and practiced the skill that keeps courthouses and kitchens humane breathing between the sentences. Morning at Willow Creek arrived like a sensible memo, cool air. A kettle that remembered its job, and a list on my table that read, Weller Walk. Photos after rain, county check, no surprises. I added one more line because habits build chairs, nouns first. No performances. The little binder waited by the door, blue ink copy sitting up straight the way paper does when it knows it matters. Weller, the neutral landman with courthouse eyes, pulled in at 9 with a canvas satchel and boots that had met both mud and minutes. We'll start at the corners, he said, clipping a magnet to a stick. Most survey monuments are rebar with a plastic cap stamped with the surveyor's license. The magnet helps. Odd fact of the morning that I didn't know yesterday, it's illegal to disturb a USGS benchmark. People have been fined for treating brass discs like souvenirs. Boundaries have feelings, and some of them are federal. We walked the south line first. The magnet found rebar under moss with a little clink that felt like a sentence ending in a period. Weller brushed soil back with the tenderness of a man folding a flag. Cap reads Hemp Hill 9725, he said. Matches your map. He logged the GPS coordinate and handed me a small orange flag. Your turn. I placed it the way you place a name on a mailbox when you finally believe you live there. My intellectual aging event arrived on the next hill when Weller unfolded a spindly tripod and set a scope on top. I'll shoot the grade, he said. My mouth offered that spinning telescope thingy, then theodolite, and my brain, smug as a cat. Finally returned transit. I wrote it in the down line of my pad transit, not telescope. Don't say NASA because vocabulary deserves a chaperone. Dignity intact, slope measured, We cut across the north field. Seep A wore its thin iridescence like an unconvincing costume. Seep B shattered obligingly under a twig. Weller sniffed, made a note, then crouched. Could be historic micro seepage, he said. Proof of interest, not proof of reserves. But coupled with that quitclaim in your chain, let's say the geology is promising and your leverage is better. He looked at me over the clipboard. Don't sell leverage in a hurry. Back at the porch, my phone buzzed with 2 messages that smelled like office carpet. Miss Cho, heads up, Crescent Ridge, recorded a memorandum of option on your parcel at 8:41 a.m. No signature from you. Wild deed. I'm filing a motion to expunge and a notice of false claim. Do not engage. I read it twice. Wild deed, the public word for paper filed by someone who doesn't own the right they're advertising, academic phrase of the day. Coase theorem, the debate where economists pretend transaction costs don't exist and everyone just trades happily in the real world. You hire Miss Cho because transaction costs show up wearing boots and filing nonsense. Detective Bennett pinged next. Preservation letters landed. Crescent Ridge created an auto-delete rule after hours bad optics. We've asked their counsel to preserve server-side copies. No interviews yet? Drive-bys continue. Somewhere a deputy was learning my gravel's pronunciation. Weller whistled low when I showed him the recorder's index. They're trying to cloud title to scare off any serious bidder, he said. Cho will swat it. Meanwhile, anybody legit will read the docket before they bring a pen. He watched me breathe. You okay? I am, I said, and meant it. I was married to an engineer. I like boring math better than sharp adjectives. We sat at the table with maps while the kettle rehearsed. What happens next, Weller said, is you decide what interest looks like, not a lease. A term sheet, at most, no check, no commitment. Just if we prove X by date Y, we'll present you with Z. If anyone shows up with a bonus check before Cho blesses it, close your door and boil water. He texted Ms. Cho, and within 10 minutes, we had a 2 p.m. slot in town with North Star Energy's land manager, Ms. Shu, not to sign, but to talk in nouns. 3 jokes to keep the ribs employed while the room did arithmetic. If drones had bedside manner, the good ones would say, turn your head before buzzing your meadow. If survey caps had dating profiles, they'd say here for a long time, not a good time. If wild deeds were wildlife, Fish and Game would relocate them to a filing cabinet. Before we left, I printed one more sign for the gate, all offers to counsel. Exhibit C must not be blank. Blue painter's tape did its quiet service. Ms. Cho called as I capped my pen. I've drafted the expungement, she said. My mouth tried expel, then expunge landed in the place reserved for verbs that rescue deeds. Intellectual aging event. Second cup filed under lawyer words you keep. Clerk at 3:30, she added, we'll uncloud your sky before dinner. In North Star's conference room, Ms. Shu arrived with a legal pad and the face of someone who has been lied to by men in hats and still believes in Tuesdays. We saw the memo of option, she said. We won't touch title until it's gone. We're here to confirm interest and learn your constraints. Ms. Cho laid out 4 no-surface operations without mutual consent. Baseline water testing, paid-up term with limited footprint, environmental indemnities that don't read like haiku. Ms. Sue nodded, wrote fast, and did not try to hand me a pen I hadn't asked for. We can work in the realm of the letter you saw in your box, she said. subject to geology and the court's housekeeping. She slid over a one-page expression of interest, not a lease, not a check. Sign or don't today. It expires without grief if you do nothing. We'll stand still until the recorder fixes your sky. Ms. Cho read it the way surgeons read scans. No exclusivity, she said. No right to file anything. Confidentiality is mutual and narrow. Fine. She looked at me. This is a we're still interested napkin. We can sign without obligating dinner. I initialed, dated, and kept a copy with the kind of satisfaction you feel when a door stays on its hinges. Ms. Shu smiled in a way that didn't sell anything. We'll send a term sheet for discussion only, she said. No haiku. Outside, the sun decided to behave. Ms. Cho peeled off toward the courthouse. Weller returned to his maps. I drove to the county office to photocopy one page because some rituals keep your pulse from inventing weather. On the way, Selena texted Travis says I should record something to protect my rights. I answered with the forward chair we keep dragging into rooms, please route through counsel. A minute later, Mr. Alden says he's withdrawing from Crescent Ridge's side of things. He looked upset. Then I didn't know they filed anything. I typed, "Thank you for telling me," and put the phone face down so I wouldn't edit her with old hopes. At 3:42, Ms. Cho called from the courthouse steps. Wild deed expunged, she said. Recorder stamped the order. If Crescent tries again, we'll bring sanctions and an adult chaperone. Her voice softened. Go make tea. I did. The cabin performed the late afternoon symphony fridge clearing its throat. Pine needles composing for floor. Kettle auditioning for lead. I taped the recorder's printout under probate later will and added a card memo of option gone 3:42 p.m. Then I walked the north field because joy deserves reps equal to outrage. A hawk wrote its brief in the air. Seep a-minded its shine. Back on the porch, Detective Bennett's cruiser rolled by, slow as a promise. He tipped 2 fingers from the wheel. I lifted my mug. He texted after, we'll interview Crescent Ridge tomorrow, polite, recorded. Counsel present? If they say, oops, clerical, I'll ask the clerk how often oops has an exhibit. 3 last jokes before the day clocks out so my lungs don't go looking for trouble. If expungement orders were spa treatments. Today's was a deep clean for title. If Coe's theorem were a dinner guest, Miss Cho would seat it far from the developers. If Blue Painter's tape had a medal, I'd pin it for services to sanity. Iris. That's the beagle on trial from the rescue would have approved the evening if she'd been here. Absent eyebrows. The rosemary did the nodding. I wrote 2 recipe cards and slid them under the tomato timer. Don't sell leverage to hurry a calendar. Asked to see Exhibit C. Then I turned off the lamps, left the fan on low, and let the cabin keep watch while the county's stamp cooled into history. Somewhere, a clerk put a file on the right shelf. Somewhere, Miss Shu closed a pad without adjectives. Somewhere, Selena looked at a text thread and chose not to send the one she'd regret. We are still being proved. And tonight proved enough. The morning after the expungement felt like a clean window, same view. Fewer smudges. Miss Cho's email landed at 7:12 a.m. with furniture tone sentences. Recorder indexed the order. Cloud removed. Probate set a short hearing next week to admit the later will and codicil by stipulation. I've reserved the right to pursue slander of title if Crescent Ridge keeps filing oops. I poured tea and let the steam underline the line about next week. Calendars that behave are my love language. Detective Bennett texted 1 minute later, interviewed Crescent Ridge Council present. They called the filing a clerical mistake, but server logs show an auto-delete rule was created after our preservation letter. We've requested server-side copies. No conclusions. Translation. We are not in a movie. We are in paperwork. At 10, Ms. Cho and I met Anita Patel, a forensic accountant whose superpower is making spreadsheets sit up and tell the truth without raising her voice. She opened the ledger's thumb drive and walked me through a few lines I'd been trying not to name aloud: an outgoing wire-tagged Crescent Ridge Holdings retainer, $150,000. A Maple Heights HELOC transferred to S. Voss, $240,000, and a cashier's check to Oak and Slate Chem Supply, special order for $800. Patterns, not verdicts, Anita said, kind before sharp. The retainer could be a consulting holdback. The HELOC could have funded medical or taxes. Oak and Slate sells both mineral assay kits and industrial cleaners. I'll subpoena invoices and match dates to phones and emails. We're just Bayesian updating. Academic phrase of the day. Bayesian updating change your belief as evidence accumulates. No pitchforks, just math with manners. My intellectual aging event arrived when Anita mentioned filing a subpoena ducis tecum. My brain offered subpoena duck season, which I did not say out loud. Then document subpoena. Then finally landed on the Latin like an adult. I wrote ducis tecum, bring the papers in the downline, and allowed myself a small grin for dignity recovered. Odd fact of the day: high-integrity evidence rooms use tamper-evident bags with sequential barcodes. If someone peels and reseals, it tattles. Anita slid our thumb drive into one with the affection of a nurse taping a good IV. Chain of custody, she said. It's boring until it's everything. At noon, Ms. Shu from North Star sent over a non-binding term sheet, 3 pages. Entirely nouns, 90 days of due diligence, no exclusive rights. No filings without consent, paid up lease only if executed later. No surface operations without mutual written agreement, baseline and periodic water testing with third-party labs, and an environmental indemnity that didn't pretend to be poetry. Miss Cho redlined 2 verbs. Added a sentence about no assignment without consent, and sent it back with the tone of a teacher who believes in homework. We ate our sandwiches in Ms. Cho's conference room, because victories taste better under good fluorescent light. Then she handed me the drafted stipulation to admit the later will and codicil. Mr. Alden signed, she said. We're on the 10 a.m. docket next Wednesday. No drama, just blue ink. I traced Daniel's signature with my eyes, as if gratitude could be notarized. Claire, no. Selena, keep the names right. Evelyn texted in the afternoon Alden withdrew from advising Crescent Ridge. I didn't know about the filing. I'm embarrassed, I typed. Thank you for saying so. Then put the phone face down. One kindness at a time. The porch still knows my pulse. By 3, the weather had ideas. So Weller and I hustled out to the north field to log seeps in actual rain. Seep A performed its lazy knit and reknit. Seep B shattered into mosaics like a child's art project. Weller held a jar to the light and said, "We don't sell interest, we sell evidence." He packed the vials as if glass breaks hearts. Back at the cabin, I taped a fresh sign to the gate, appointments only, counsel present. Because blue painter's tape is my usher. Detective Bennett's cruiser rolled by, slow as good advice. He tipped 2 fingers. I lifted my mug. A minute later, also, good sign. I considered making one for the fridge. Exhibit C must not be blank. 3 jokes. So the lungs keep their shift. If clerical error were a cologne, it would smell like toner and regret. If term sheets were bread, the best kind is crusty nouns with no sugary adjectives. If chain of custody had a jingle, it'd be seal it, sign it, date it, don't narrate it. At 4, Ms. Cho called with a sound only lawyers can make satisfied caution. The court put us first, Wednesday, she said. Bring ID. Bring calm. After, we'll file a notice of non-consent to any filings by Crescent Ridge and, depending on Anita's work, reserve claims. Reserve claims, a polite way to say, we remember. Selena asked for a video call at 5. Counsel CC'd, which is my favorite preposition. Her face looked less like a press release and more like a person. I'm sorry, she said. For the porch. For the pressure. Mr. Alden added. My client will not contact Crescent Ridge further. Ms. Cho nodded. Our side will proceed by paper, per stipulation. We all breathed at the same time, the closest thing to music I've heard in a week. Iris showed up around 6, delivered by a volunteer whose sweatshirt said Second Chance Seniors. The beagle's eyebrows could cross-examine a tree. She did a perimeter check, approved the rug, and parked at my feet with a sigh that translated as, "You seem like a woman who labels folders." Correct. I set a water bowl on a mat that read Paws and Claws because I was unsupervised in the craft aisle once. Dinner was soup that understood its assignment. I wrote 3 recipe cards and slid them under the tomato timer. Let paper carry the adjectives. Ask for the lab report, not the story. Don't confuse speed with care. The kettle clicked consent. Anita emailed near dusk, subject line, Deuces Tecum, in flight. Subpoenas to Crescent Ridge retainer invoices, comms with S, Voss, any option drafts. To Oak and Slate SKU list, MSDS sheets. And to Maple Heights lender, HELOC draw logs. No allegations, just receipts. Attached. A timeline the retainer wire hit 2 months before Daniel's first hospitalization. The HELOC transfer posted 3 weeks after. Oak and Slate cashed a cashier's check 9 days before a family meeting. I remember for its citrus perfume and brittle kindness. I didn't draw arrows. I drew boxes around the dates and wrote, wait in the margin because Bayesian updating doesn't wear handcuffs. Academic phrase. Second serving, procedural justice still running like a quiet hymn. Beneath it all, people accept outcomes they don't love if they can see the rails. Rails are blue ink and timestamps and signed logs. Rails look like boredom when you're young. They look like mercy later. My second intellectual aging event ambushed me when Ms. Cho asked whether I'd sign a declaration under penalty of perjury about the safe deposit opening. My brain was halfway to affidavit and affirmation and briefly vacationed at Affiant before landing on the simple noun declaration. I wrote declaration equals sworn statement. Notary optional and let my shoulders drop back where they live. Odd fact, second helping those red accordion folders lawyers love are called red welts after the brand. They are the adult equivalent of capes. Nobody flies in them. But everyone walks faster. Ms. Cho gave me one labeled probate hearing. I resisted the urge to curtsy. After dark, rain stitched the roof into a decent lullaby. Iris snored like a distant appliance. I walked the perimeter locks, stove, breaker panel, and paused at the shadow of Edward's handwriting on the toolbox. No signatures without Evelyn. I touched the lid as if it were a wrist that could answer. Still no. I said, still me. 3 last jokes, so Sleep knows where to find me. If Supina's Deuces Tecum had a mascot, it would be a polite Labrador named Bring It. If expungement orders were laundry, today was a hot wash for bad filings. If Red Welts ran a city, the potholes would be labeled and fixed by Wednesday. I turned off the lamps, left the fan on low, and let the cabin keep watch with the rain. Somewhere, a clerk checked a box and went home on time. Somewhere, Anita's barcodes counted quietly. Somewhere, a developer's outbox met a preservation letter and decided to behave. On my table, the term sheet and the stipulation lay side by side like 2 good chairs. I set the tomato timer for 12 minutes, not to cook, but to remind my lungs nouns first, no performances. Court morning felt like a well-folded map creases where you need them, none where you don't. I ironed my voice to the indoor setting, put the certified copies in the blue binder, and wrote 1 line on the legal pad's downline: breathe, blue ink, no performances, Ms. Cho met me on the courthouse steps with a nod that meant we had our nouns. Inside, the 10 a.m. docket moved like good choreography, no solos. Everybody on the beat. Odd fact of the day, most court pens are deliberately boring black or blue. Medium nib, because copy machines and scanners love predictability. I chose blue. Copies adore fidelity. We were first. The judge had the posture of a person who trusts chairs. Miss, Cho announced. Stipulation to admit later will dated 8 months subsequent. And codicil 4 months subsequent, all properly executed. Parties so stipulate. Mr. Alden. Now, just Selena's counsel, not the developers, Rosen said. We stipulate. The judge read exactly what needed reading. Nothing more? Later in time controls, she said. Codicil admitted. No contest provision noted. She looked at both tables. And I mean noted. Her gavel was more comma than exclamation. Academic phrase of the day, interim clause, a no contest clause designed to discourage mischief by threatening a beneficiary's share. Ours wasn't a threat, it was a boundary with manners. The judge entered the order, the clerk stamped the order, the stamp thumped like a small bird choosing the right branch. Paper beats adjectives. Again. Respectfully. Outside, air tasted wider. Ms. Cho handed me a copy of the order, already cooling. Will file a notice of non-consent to any more memoranda from Crescent Ridge and reserve claims for slander of title if they get creative. Translation rails installed, parade discouraged. Elder wisdom of the day, don't confuse relief with repair, celebrate. Then keep sweeping. Detective Bennett called as we cleared security. 2 quicks, he said. 1 Crescent's clerical error came after an auto-delete rule fired. We've preserved server copies. 2 Oak and Slate confirms the purchase was assay kits and reagents legal. Boring, refundable. No poison plots today. I let out a laugh that remembered the coffee tray I didn't drink and felt my shoulders descend a floor. Next steps, I asked. Invoices and emails. He said. If a crime is in here, it's paper shy and process averse. We'll take our time. We hung up with a mutual affection for receipts. Selena texted through counsel an hour later. I'm relieved the will is settled. I won't contact Crescent Ridge again. I'm meeting with Dr. Sloan about not using speed as care. I typed, thank you for choosing nouns, and set the phone face down so old hopes wouldn't try to write a screenplay. At lunch, Ms. Cho, Anita the forensic accountant, and I occupied a corner table that believes in meatloaf. Anita slid over a simple timeline, the so-called retainer to Crescent Ridge months before Daniel's first hospitalization, The HELOC draw to Voss soon after. Oak and slate in the middle. None of this is a verdict, she said quietly. It is a question with dates. We'll marry bank logs to emails and phone metadata. Patient updating favors patience. She packed our thumb drive into a tamper-evident bag and scolded the zipper with a label maker. I wanted to applaud the label maker. We spent the afternoon doing what wins more battles than speeches paperwork. Miss Cho filed the notice of non-consent. I signed a declaration describing the safe deposit opening. Under penalty of perjury, hands steady. My brain tried to flirt with affidavit, then behaved. Dignity intact, Latin supervised. Weller sent over photos of corner monuments with their survey caps, Hemp Hill 9725, tidy as a sermon, and North Star's Ms. Shu emailed a revised term sheet reflecting our tweaks: no filings, no surface operations, baseline and periodic water testing by a third-party lab, and no assignment without consent. No checks, no glitter, just nouns. 3 jokes for the ribcage, so lungs remember they're unionized if gavels had settings. Mine would be comma, not symbol. If term sheets were bread, I'd order crusty nouns. Hold the adjectives. If clerk stamps ran a choir, they'd all sing in key and on time. I drove to Willow Creek before the sky could choose drama. The gate sign. Appointments only. Counsel present. Hung like good posture. Iris greeted me with eyebrows that could cross-examine a minister and escorted me to the porch as if we'd just won something sensible. I made tea and walked the perimeter locks, stove, breaker panel, because rituals protect breath. On the porch, I wrote 3 cards for the tomato timer's stack relief repair, keep sweeping. Asked to see Exhibit C. Nouns first, let verbs carry weight. Then I took Iris on a slow loop to the north field. Seep A did its lazy knit and reknit. Seep B broke like shy glass. Weller's words returned, don't sell leverage in a hurry. I put my hand on the flagged rebar boundary as heartbeat and thanked the earth for witnesses that don't require applause. At dusk, Selena and Mr. Alden joined a short video call with Ms. Cho. No drama, just adults with calendars. We confirmed the probate order. Alden promised a letter to Crescent Ridge, memorializing no authority to act and no engagement past today. Selena added, I'll route all estate questions through you. I'm taking a sabbatical from fixing things quickly, I said. That sounds like care, and meant it. I ended the day the way I like ending small, faithful, unphotogenic, soup that doesn't try to be a metaphor. A binder in a drawer, not as a threat, but as a neighbor, Iris snoring like an appliance 3 rooms away. The fan stitching the dark into something that doesn't unravel when you blink. The order admitting the later will lay on the table under a clip that could hold a roof if asked nicely. Odd fact, second helping court orders are public, but the feeling of them isn't. The feeling is private, like a letter that finally learned your name. I placed a pebble in my pocket for tomorrow's visit to Daniel's Stone Pebbles. Don't wilt. They say I was here and you still are. We'll keep the words short there. He preferred nouns, too. Academic phrase. Second serving procedural justice, humming under everything people can accept, outcomes they didn't ask for if the path was legible, respectful, and on time. Today was legible, respectful, on time, elder wisdom. Final for tonight, justice often arrives in paper shoes. They're quiet, but they fit. 3 last jokes, so sleep finds me without detouring through adrenaline. If docket sheets had lullabies, they'd be stapler sounds in a soft room. If Chain of Title were a bedtime story, the moral would be, don't sign blank exhibits. If beagle eyebrows were a legal doctrine, they'd be strict scrutiny. I turned off the lamps, left the fan on low, and let the cabin keep watch. Somewhere, a clerk locked the file room and went home to soup. Somewhere, Ms. Shu tucked a term sheet into a folder no haiku could invade. Somewhere, Detective Bennett's drive-by rolled over gravel that knows my name. On my table, blue ink cooled like a good idea. The room breathed. So did I. Morning began with a pebble in my pocket and a list on my table recorder, pickup certified order, Ms. Shu term sheet call, Weller corner photos, thank you notes, Iris approved with a single eyebrow. I drove to the cemetery with tea that didn't need to be brave. At Daniel Stone. I set the pebble where last week's rain had rinsed the letters clean. We filed the later will. I said. The codicil, too. The court used blue ink and a small gavel. I told him about the wild deed, the expungement order, the landman with courthouse eyes, the term sheet that refuses adjectives. I did not narrate my grief. I gave it a chair. Odd fact of the day, some recorders still index deeds by book and page. A system older than most roofs. Scan a document wrong, and the whole county goes on a treasure hunt. I picked up a certified copy of yesterday's order book. Page, date, then walked out into a sky that chose to be ordinary and therefore kind. Miss Shu called at 10 with a voice that trusts nouns. Our geophysics team can run passive seismic and a small magnetometer survey from the county road, no surface entry, no stakes. She said, baseline water sampling next week, no filings, no checks, just data. She paused. If any developer claims an option, send me the expungement order. We feed our lawyers regularly. I laughed the way you do when competence doesn't apologize for itself. We set a date for science and ended the call with the feeling of a door that closes gently. My intellectual aging event arrived 10 minutes later when Ms. Cho asked whether I wanted a short MOU with North Star. Memo of understanding I offered, then winced. No memorandum. Memorandum of understanding. I wrote MOU, not a lease. Napkin with signatures in the downline and rewarded my dignity with lemon tea. Not necessary yet, she said. Term sheet is enough. We keep verbs small until facts grow up. Academic phrase of the day. Moral hazard, when people take risks because someone else pays the bill. Crescent Ridge filed paper they didn't own because someone else would have to clean the title. The court made them pay in stamps and a frown. Procedure is how you charge tuition for bad incentives. Detective Bennett checked in at lunch. Invoices from Oak and Slate match assay kits and lab reagents. He said, no thriller, just chemistry. The retainer to Crescent Ridge looks like a consulting gambit that never matured bad optics. Not yet a crime. We're still pulling emails. Translation, we are not hunting dragons. We are sorting receipts. Relief arrived like a sensible coat. At 2, Weller stopped by with prints of the corner monuments Hemp Hill, 9725, stamped into orange caps. Each one a period at the end of a boundary sentence. I filed affidavits of monumentation with the county. He said, if any cap wanders off, the paper remembers where it stood. He tapped the north field on my map. When the rain stops, someone will ask you for a story. Give them a calendar. 3 jokes to keep the lungs unionized if passive seismic had bedside manner, it would say hold still and actually mean it. If book and page were a dating app, you'd swipe right on legibility. If boundaries had a favorite punctuation mark, it'd be the period, not the exclamation point. In the afternoon, I met Selena and Mr. Alden on a video call Miss Cho hosted. Nobody tried to audition for righteousness. The order is entered, Ms. Cho said. No more porch visits, no third-party filings, all communications through counsel. Alden nodded. Understood. My client will not engage Crescent Ridge. Selena added. I'll keep my distance from fast solutions. I'm working with Dr. Sloan. Her eyes were tired in a human way. I wanted safety and mistook speed for it. I said, safety likes schedules. And we left it there, two adults who have learned to stop making sentences do jobs they're not trained for. Back at Willow Creek, I wrote thank yous, one to Miss Cho for walking the courthouse like a choir director, one to Weller for the little flags, one to Miss Shu for showing up with nouns. I taped the court's order under probate order admitted and labeled a new Redweld Minerals data, not stories. The binder drawer felt less like armor and more like furniture. Iris and I took the long path. Seep A did its slow braid. Seep B shattered obligingly. The flags on the corners kept their polite orange. A hawk put punctuation in the air. The woods didn't clap. They never do. That's why I trust them. At dusk, I met Selena at the diner under the treaty coffee. 20 minutes, no bank talk. We traded ordinary weather. Iris's eyebrows. A recipe for soup that doesn't try to be profound. She didn't say sorry again. She said, "Thank you for not letting me be fast when fast was wrong." I said, "Thank you for choosing nouns." We left without promises, which felt like progress. Night gathered itself neatly. I set 3 cards under the tomato timer. Let science speak before signatures. Relief repair, keep sweeping. Legacy is a standing order, not a statue. I wrote a letter labeled, "In case I forget," and tucked it into the trust binder. If someone waves a check, ask for Exhibit C. If they offer a story, ask for the log. If you are tired, boil water and sit down. It's not wisdom, it's plumbing for the soul. Plumbing for... Odd fact. Second helping Rosemary's name may come from Rose Marinus dew of the sea, because it thrives on mist more than rain. The sprig on my windowsill leaned toward the night as if it heard its Latin. I leaned with it. Ms. Shu emailed near 9, survey team booked for Monday, testing Tuesday. Results in a week. We stay off your grass. Miss Cho added a quiet Coda Crescent Ridges Council proposed a mutual no-contact stipulation with sanctions for violation. I said yes. Blue ink tomorrow. Rails. Installed. I ended the day the way I intend to end more of them soup. A kettle that remembers its job. A fan that sows the dark into something gentle. A binder that sits there like a neighbor, not a threat. Legacy is not the zeros I might someday negotiate, it's the standing order already running bus passes. Page turners, gray muzzle kibble. The GED class that writes, "Please send that in writing," and means it. 3 last jokes for the pillow, so sleep can find me without GPS. If gavels came with dimmers, mine would be set to library. If Redwelds wore capes, they'd be invincible against glitter, but weak to coffee rings. If beagle eyebrows were a legal remedy, they'd be specific performance, I turned off the lamps, left the fan on low, and let the cabin keep watch. Somewhere, a clerk filed book and page in the correct drawer. Somewhere, a magnetometer hummed in a lab, getting ready to translate dirt into evidence. Somewhere, a daughter-in-law chose a slower kindness. The night made room for all of it without adjectives. I breathed. The kettle clicked, yes. We are not done being proved. We are simply ready for the next page. Let's wind everything down. Picture a small cabin that finally knows your footsteps. A kettle obeying its one good verb. And a drawer where blue ink orders sleep beside maps that smell faintly of cedar. A county clerk stamped the later will and codicil. The codicil's quiet boundary now sits between greed and grief like a chair that won't tip. A developer filed a wild deed to cloud the sky. The court washed it out. A landman flagged the corners. A manager with nouns, not adjectives, sent a term sheet that promises data before drama. The detective kept preservation letters moving, while a forensic accountant tucked a thumb drive into a tamper-evident bag, letting Bayesian patience outwork cinematic suspicion. In that space, love changed costumes. Selena stopped confusing speed with care and agreed to route everything through counsel. We kept the meeting small and the verbs honest: stipulate, expunge, sample, file, breathe. The North Field kept its two truths seep and knitting itself back together. Seep B breaking like shy glass, and a hawk wrote punctuation no judge would argue with. The binder became furniture, not armor. The Redwelds learned everyone's names. Legacy sharpened into utility. Not spectacle bus passes for GED testers, books for page turners, bowls for gray muzzles. The trust paperwork revocable now. Useful later sits where it belongs, with a note that says, "Don't build statues, build schedules." Safety, it turns out, favors calendars over crusades. So lower your shoulders. You can let the fan stitch the dark. The room will keep watch while the county's book and page cools. If someone arrives with a story, ask for the log. If they bring a check, ask to see Exhibit C. If you forget the lawyer word, write it in the margin and forgive yourself. Rosemary thrives on mist. Dignity thrives on procedure. Tonight, both are enough.